good day to you, Barstool and Bandtalkers. You think it's just going to be me, but no, I have a very special interview tonight. It's not just going to be me talking to myself. We're going to start a new series on the players. And when I mean players, I mean all musicians. So if you're a musician and you think you have a story to tell, we want to hear from you. We're going to start with drummers. We're going to talk to bass players. We're going to talk to guitar players. We're going to talk to horn players, keyboard players. We want to kind of get up to the players too. This isn't just all about LSD, as my friend Sean talks about, lead singer syndrome, or lead singer disease. It's actually about the musicians that made this thing happen. So we're going to talk to Sean, because Sean is one of my favorite drummers for 36 years. So we're going to talk to him a little bit about drums and being a maritime musician here in this scene. And he's qualified to talk about it. Welcome, Sean.
How is she going? And so the Dave, really, all our buddies that we put the shout out to that are saying they're nervous to do interviews, they're going to see how easy it is once I blow this to pieces, my friend.
Okay, well, we'll see. I asked some pretty tough questions. I was going to be real honest with you.
Let's go.
All right. Sean McKenna, drummer for how long?
Oh, 30 some odd years. To be honest with you, I took after my band Jack Butler broke up, I didn't touch a kit of drums for about 5 years, and I sold everything, totally got out of it, was just totally unenamored with the music scene, if you will. And what got me back involved again was when I moved back to Halifax and reconnected with you, and Scott Chevrier wanted to start something, and I was like, okay, let's give her a go. So that's kind of how I got back into it. So I'll say 20 plus years. How does that sound?
That's fair. Yeah, I remember that. Because that was the year 2000. You moved back. I remember that now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So now, are you professionally trained? I know that you have we're going to talk about some of your disciplines and your practice routines, but I want to know if you were professionally trained.
So it's kind of funny. A lot of people want to play a certain instrument. I kind of happened on it in a weird way. My next door neighbor was Paul Lawson, and Paul, we need to get you on the show. And Paul had every musical instrument. He's hanging out with his son Joey, and Paul had a set of drums in his basement. I was probably 8, maybe 10 years old, and we would go over there when Paul wasn't home, and we just kind of fake jam. And Paul would come home and he'd be like, get off those drums, because they were the drummer in his band's drums and whatnot. And we did that for a little bit. And then we kind of lost touch. And then I was hanging out with Mike Chittick and Todd Zaney and Tommy Chittick and Andy Robichaud and Ian Fancy and all these guys. And we just said one day, we're like, let's start a band. We were into Kiss. We were into all these things. And so everybody went around the table, and Joey picked guitar because Paul could teach him. Andy picked guitar because his brother played guitar. Mike Chittick picked bass. Todd picked vocals. And it's like, drums, like I wanted to play guitar, but I get through the short stick. So I went home and I told my mother, fine, this is probably the 5th or 6th instrument that I tried and potentially was going to quit. And I remember coming home and thinking, there's no way. And she was so excited because she grew up listening to Gene Krupa. That was her favorite. She made a call to a gentleman by the name of Al Resk, who basically said, bring him over, we'll give him a lesson, and we'll let him know right out of the gate if he can handle it or not. And nervous as crap, I went over there, and I think he did, 10 lessons in one day, and I came back. So I trained with Al, then I took some time off, and I trained with Scott Ferguson, who Scott's awesome, has a studio here in Dartmouth, played with the Rankins. Those are the two guys that I train with, and then for the most part, I be able to read enough to be deadly, but or the lack thereof, but and for the most part self-taught and just playing with guys and figuring it out.
So your first band would have been China White, I guess, and the first real band, is that right?
So Todd Zaney and I and Mike Chittick and whatever, we had a band called Black Widow when none of us actually played, and it was China White, and what it was myself and Ian practiced as a duo in my mother's basement, bass and drums. And that was just probably as exciting as it sounds. And the two of us played forever, and then we hooked up with a guy by the name of Doug Parsons. And then from there, a buddy of ours, Peter Delmont, was going out with a girl who knew a girl that Ian was going out with and introduced. Well, we knew Pete, but anyway, we jammed and that was it. And then China White kind of formed, and away we went. And we did that for a while. And you were in China White at one point, in between Hellraiser and all kinds of that stuff.
Yep.
And yeah, and we get started. It was pretty fun.
So then from China White, and of course that's when I was there. So we morphed into Sweet Surrender, and we started hitting in, I want to say late '86, '87, the bar scene. That's when you and I started. So for you, is it more important, or I guess, do you enjoy the writing aspect of playing drums, like recording, or do you like playing live? What's your favorite?
That's a really good question, because I really like to. When we had Jack Butler, we recorded at Reg McMichael's studio with JPR, Snow and Reg, and it was very cool because you're doing all these parts and you think, oh my God, they're translating great, and then you go and you lay them down and it's like, I might have to change that for the purpose of this because it's just not jiving, or you're just not getting it. So I like that aspect, and in Jack Butler, we all wrote in some different way, and Garth and I used to go down to my mother's basement and practice the rhythm parts. I used to say Garth was he everything he wrote seemed to be a rudiment, and so there was a lot of shots and stuff that, thank God, I had stick control, or I might have had a problem. But then live, different bag of bananas. It's so much fun, the interaction with the crowd. I'd say 50-50. I mean, if I'm in the studio, I love it. If I'm live, I love it.
That's fair. That's fair. So you talk about rudiments now. So how important is it for you to keep fluid, to keep practicing? Is that an important part of your? Pardon me? I'm sorry?
I said I thought you were asking tough questions, but I sense one.
So how important is it for you to practice on a regular basis, I guess? Would you lose those 5 years you took off? Would you say you lost your chops or no?
I lost the crappy ones, to be honest with you. I lost the ones that I did noodling and just, ones that see, it's funny, right? It took me a long time to appreciate a guy like Phil Rudd from AC/DC because, to me, if you weren't playing notes and notes and notes and notes, you weren't quote unquote a drummer. And it took me a long time to to appreciate a guy like that. And so now it's kind of interesting because in the frequency, Kyle and I we were talking about this the other night. It's not an easy show to play, but there's an awful lot of stuff I don't get to play. So when I practice, I actually practice a lot of stuff that I probably will never play. But it's neat because it's some of those old bad chops are actually turning into good chops. So I don't feel gypped or shortchanged that I don't get to play them because I get to play them in the basement. And that's kind of fun. And every now and again, there might be something in those chops that I get to use live. So that's kind of cool. But I do think that it is important to practice. I unfortunately have carpal tunnel syndrome, and for anybody who's a drummer or a musician knows it's not necessarily painful as much as it is annoying. And if you're not constantly practicing and warming up, it can be a rough go when you're playing. So I'll give a shout out to my boys that I had to take care of me with the sticks, because if it wasn't for those sticks, I'd have a really rough time. But I think it's very important to practice. And, and even when I played with Caper, I'll be honest with you, I didn't practice that much. But I do now. And it's not to necessarily keep up with people or, it's not that I'm worried that I'm, somebody's going to be better than me. It's just something that I like to do that I enjoy to do. And, it's a bonus that maybe it's a little exercise to keep the chops up at the same time.
Very good. So now, in my opinion, and again, I'm a little bit biased because you and I have been friends for 36 years, but you're one of my favorite drummers, and your double bass work is phenomenal. And I know you don't get a chance to do that very often in the frequency because we had Carl Woodrow on the show, and you kind of told me like, yeah. But now, now I'm not a drummer, so I don't know for sure. Is that a different rudiment exercise that you have to practice?
Well, Kyle Blinder's been so good for my playing because Kyle's the minimalist. Kyle he loves Springsteen, he loves Dylan, he loves the Stones, so a lot of stuff that I wouldn't necessarily consider athletic drumming, Kyle loves. But I challenge anybody to play Don Henley like Don Henley. It's tough. And so with Kyle, I've really learned the whole less is more sort of thing. So what I do in the basement is I practice an awful lot of double kick that I probably don't get to use a whole heck of a lot. Truthfully, maybe there's 2, maybe 3 times a night in the frequency. I mean, I used to use a lot, and Jack Butler, but it's something I guess I could pull out if I had to. But now I maybe less speed, more taste, and that's just kind of what I try to do now. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Hey, but you just keep swinging.
Spoiler alert: Sean and I have been working on a little keeper on the side. No pun intended. A little side project that we were kind of in the midst of getting down before this crazy virus hit. But playing with you again, Sean, after 10, 15 years, I hadn't played with you in a long time. I was really shocked to see you pull at the metronome. So how important is that to your practice or your playing?
Well, again, I'm going to give props to Kyle because I had a super, I'll call it humbling experience back when Jack Butler. So we were in Toronto and we had the opportunity to record, and Peter Arsenault will remember this. We had an opportunity to record with a guy named Marty Anderson who played keyboards with Rick Emmett. And I remember Marty wanted us to use a click track studio. And I remember we were coming back to Halifax, and Marty was like, "Here's the tunes, be ready." I had never played really with a click track before. And I'm not going to say I have metronomic timing, but typically if you go in the studio and you pay attention, there will be speeds ups and slows down and that type of thing. But I was terrified. And I remember I had a little apartment, young in Windsor, and I set up my drums in the kitchen, and all I did was practice to a click track. And I remember going up there being terrified, and literally Marty was like, "Dude, are you going to be able to do this?" Because I was far from solid with it, and I was able to eke it out and whatever. And then it kind of fell by the wayside. But when I got the frequency, Kyle wanted to use it because a previous drummer had used it. And Kyle really liked the, he calls it, the boat starts out in a certain way, and you launch the boat, and then it's kind of floating on there, and maybe it speeds up and maybe it slows down, but once it's launched, you're fine. And in the frequency, we're pretty bang on with that click track. And it's actually, I'm not going to say comical, but it's a little funny. Sometimes we'll get somebody that'll sub with us that doesn't like the click, and they're very nervous about it. But I would say I don't know that I'd like to play live now without using one. I mean, I practice with it all the time. Even when I go down in the basement on, it's like, wow, I feel kind of weird without it, and it's just something that I'm used to. So for me, I love it, and it's imperative.
So you and I played together a lot in different bands, and in the same band in the late 80s, into the 90s. You kept playing with Jack Butler, then you guys went to Toronto, came back in 2000. We kind of tried it again with the Full Circle band with Scott Chevrier. We started filling the blank to turn into Caper. You had a great success in Caper all through the years, the 2000, 2010. What do you find different now? Because I know for us, and you and I have gone out a few times just to watch different local bands, and we've talked about this so many times on the show, Sean, is that how things have changed, what it used to be, what it is. Most of the venues now are in places like Pizza Town or Freeman's, where there's not even a stage. So as a drummer, what's your options?
Well, I mean, the days of, the Tommy Lee or the Neil Peart or Alex Van Halen kid are definitely not there anymore. I mean, it's kind of funny. I'll go play Dolan's Pub in Fredericton or even the Halifax Ale House, and I can literally get every bit of my drum kit in 2 trips because they're all in cases. And I mean, I play a 4-piece kit with, I'm a minimalist when we play, and part of that is there's just not the space to set up. One of the things when I moved back that was kind of because it wasn't this way in Toronto, there was still a lot of bands playing. When I moved back, I remember going out the first few times with you, and it was 3-piece bands, 2 acoustic guitar players and a bass player, or two acoustic guests, but very little drums. And if anybody was playing drums, maybe it was like a Cajon or something like that. And it's coming back, but unfortunately, the scene for a while was very anti-drummer. I mean, you had the Shamelesses were Chris was out there playing and different sorts of guys. But I think now it's great because you have guys like, Tommy from Shameless and Mark from Shaded, and not to name drop, but myself. And, we're guys that are playing kits that it's good to see again, where there was a period of time where it wasn't there. That being said, you have to kind of know where you are, and you have to, you can't be you can't be hitting things that 800 decimals. I mean, a lot of guys that mixed me before we go, oh my God, he finally got it after all these years. But you have to be prepared to be able to go in and maybe not be as heavy-handed,
Right.
and kind of adapt to where you are. Because with the small stages, and I mean, some like the lower deck, small stage, places like that, you're a drummer that sets up, but you still have to get your bandmates on the stage. So you got to be mindful of that. So it's just a different thing. You got to adapt. That's the main thing.
So that's, I guess, when we look going forward, I mean, and I might as well tell you right now, if you're a budding musician, we encourage you to, create a scene, be part of the scene. But you'll hear us talk about the stages that we played on from yesteryear, and they are gone. You're not going to see stages like we saw at the Palace or at the Misty Moon or the Crazy Horse or JB's for that matter. Some of the bigger stages, there was beautiful stages all around the province. The Chestnut Lounge in Fredericton, I remember Scotland Yard and Truro. There's Smooth Harmons, there's some big stages. Those days are gone. Here's a question I have for you, and I was shocked about this with you, John McKenna. I was shocked about this because I know in my time in the Midlife Crisis Band, we played a lot of these smaller venues. One of our main staples was the Swift Pro, and it was a really, really shallow stage. And you had probably above 8 feet, maybe. It's all you had, but it was wide. So you kind of had to set up your band differently. They didn't like acoustic kits. They didn't want to see a wooden drum kit come in that door because you couldn't control the volume. So they were more adamant about bringing in electric kits. When I saw you with an electric kit, I almost fell off my chair. How do you find the difference transitioning between an acoustic kit and an electric kit?
Great question. I got out of the electric kit for quite a while, and I recently, just from practicing and thinking, hey, the risk kind of giving me a hard time. I kind of investigated different sorts of things and didn't want to spend an arm and a leg. So I happened on the Alesis Nitro Mesh, which showed out to them too, because they're propping me up and whatnot. But so I find if you want to make that transition, anybody that's ever done it, you have to find an electronic kit that feels like a real kit. And I know that sounds weird, but everything from the heads, anybody that came up in the same time that I did, they remember those stop sign Simmons drums that were like, hitting the pavement, and so many wrist injuries with those. And then they get the round pads that were rubber, but they were still rigid. The mesh heads now, you can tune them up, you can tune them down, you can get a feel, but then you can actually go into the kit itself and create another feel. So that's the big thing, and find something that works for you. Now, I will say about the Split Crow, I stopped. Kyle and the boys were playing there as a 3-piece, and I stopped doing it. And we'll be bringing the electric kit in there where all this stuff kind of revamps. But again, it gets down to, and I don't want to sound preachy because I'm the worst guy. I used to get, I can remember a gig in Manitowoc where the club owner had me I had towels all over my drum kit because I was too loud. So I get the whole too loud thing. But the one thing that I have learned is, what, it gets to be a pain in the ass. It can always be told to turn down or play lighter. So you can do one of two things. You can either figure out how to do it, or you can just be frustrated, right? So I just sort of roll with the punches and figure out how to do it. And when you actually do, and electronic drums actually has helped me with that. So I don't know, just works for me. Again, I don't want to be preachy, but it works for me.
That's shocking. I saw you guys play in Caper after I left the band, and you had gone to a 3-piece kit. It's like, oh my God, that was enough of a shock. But the electronic kit, I couldn't believe it. I never would think that I could see you without a double bass setup. I couldn't picture it at all. But I guess for me, now again, I'm not a drummer. And you said with the head, so does it feel like you're hitting like a drum head? Like you feel like you could put your stick right through, or can you put your stick right through it? Because I just think that it would be so different.
Yeah, you can, and it's funny because they have to be amplified. So you either have to have headphones or a monitor or whatever. So when you hit them, they're not amplified. They sound like a pillow. They might not feel like a pillow, but really there's no sound. As soon as you put them on, they sound like a real drum kit. So the feel actually changes because of what you're hearing. It's weird how your mind kind of plays. But it does little things too, like it allows you to not play as loud. It forces you sometimes to learn a little bit of a different technique, which actually does translate, I find, over to a real kit. At one point in Caper, and it was funny, and we had a band, Kyle and Scott Harnish and I, we were called Frankie Deuce, and we were doing Wednesdays at the Ale House. And I used a stand-up kit, Slim Jim from the street. And I remember Mark Wheatley, who Mark does Peter Chris and Dressed to Kill. And Mark came out and he's like, "How the hell do you do a stand-up kit?" And I thought about it, and it's like, I don't know, because it was out of necessity, because one night I just didn't have the space. And that's another thing that actually helped me play lighter, because you kind of have to lean back on one leg, and it's a whole other, but it really, oddly enough, for somebody that's had a bad back his whole life, it actually helped my back. So it's kind of weird, right? So it's different things, man. I kind of constantly got to learn. You got to constantly, steal things from other people and make them your own. And if you're standing in one place, man, you're dying. You got to keep going, right?
So I guess another big change, or another transition in the modern drummer is they're not the big Neanderthals that they once were. With the big kits. You have to be somewhat of an electronics expert now too. I mean, if you're going to fine tune an electronic drum kit to the sounds that you like, the way you play, I would think it's a lot of trial and error to get those sounds just right. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the equipment now is, there's this wonderful thing that was, pretty new called the internet, where you can go on and you can, Google things and whatnot. I was talking to my Lisa's guy today, because I was having a problem with one of the kick drum pads, and he was, I was actually, for somebody that doesn't consider himself super technically savvy, he was throwing all this stuff at me, and I was actually able to say, you know what, I tried all that, it didn't work. And finally he was like, "We're just going to send you a new one," because and it was great. So and I credit some of that to Scott Harnish, because when I had my first electronic kit, I couldn't even figure out how to go into the brain to split it left and right to actually get a stereo signal to go out front. And Scott always used to do that for me. And, I can definitely be one of those guys that if somebody's going to do something for me, I'm good with it. And I don't figure it out. So that was really cool. But yeah, and I mean, and again, it's funny, because in the frequency, I've never had so much gear that's not drum gear in my life as in this band. I've got, mic kits and headphone amps and I've got probably more cables than at least one of the guys on the stage. So it's, you gotta figure this stuff out. And I mean, a shout out to a guy like Matt Muse, who Matt plays in a band called Satori. Matt's a young guy who's really dialed into this stuff, and Matt will be a guy, "Hey Matt, what about this? How do I do that?" Because he's very interested in that. So I guess the message is, I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth, but use your resources and don't try to do it yourself, because there's a lot of people that know stuff out there that can really help you along, right?
So what's the message that you would give to an up-and-coming drummer now, Sean?
Well, I know for me, like when and if anybody can see this, I grew up a huge Kiss fan. There's a small part of my collection there, and and I was really obsessed with that. But one of the things I remember when we first started going out, we played with Drama, and I get to see Creighton Doan play every night, was just floored. And then Irving Hennessy, and I get to see Irving, and then Chris Monroe and Rob Frick, and some of these. And seeing a guy named Brett Bezanson, who is no longer with us, who was just amazing. And his name's coming up a lot on the page. Again, it was great. One of the things that I probably didn't do a lot of, I wouldn't have called myself like what I liked, and got okay competent at it. But one of the things that I didn't do, and I remember one night playing the Moon, struggling with a shuffle, and Neil, that used to play with, he played with Paul Lawson, but he used to play with Minglewood. And if anybody knew Neil, like, what a wicked player. I remember him and Ainsley, who used to play with Dutchy Mason, coming up to me, "What the hell are you doing?" And it's just like, because I couldn't do a shuffle. And, those guys kind of show me, and just being scared to like screw up in front of those guys and actually learn it. But I just think you go out, you spend the time, you can learn from everybody that's out there. And it's taken me a long time to understand that. But you can learn from everybody. And there's guys, Trevor Axford, who's a friend of yours and mine. Trevor's a very competent drummer. There's things that Trevor used to do when he used to play. He'd sit on the drum kit and be like, wow. I would be like, I'm not paying attention to that, Trevor, because you're not a drummer. Now I'd be like, absolutely, you know. So I think that's the big thing. Just learn from everybody, because there's an awful lot of, you know, like I think about trying to learn how to play back in the day and trying to learn different chops and stuff. It's all out there on the internet. It's crazy. Like, you know, these kids, you see these 7-year-olds that are flying around on every instrument, and it's because they have the you know, the benefit of technology.
Yeah.
And I think you got to take technology. Yeah, you have to take what's going on around you. You have to, you know, appreciate, like, you know, there's so many guys. The guy that played in Pink, man alive. You think, you know, the guy Jonathan the Moffat that used to play with Michael Jackson. I mean, these are guys I never would have listened to. That you watch them and you go like, wow, did I ever miss out on that? So I just open mind and just learn. And if you're at a bar and you're watching somebody, you know, just dial in what they're doing. Don't sit there and cross your arms like we used to do and say, I can do that. Because chances are you probably can't. Chances are, if you're a good guy and go ask how they're doing it, they will tell you, right? You know, Barry Hughes, who is Barry Hughes, sorry, a good friend of mine, owns Dolan's in Fredericton. Barry's a drummer himself, and I've never seen a guy who will come up and ask guys, how do you do this? How do you do that? Barry's been playing longer than I have, and he still asks. You know, and you learn an awful lot from those guys, right? So I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I think that's the big, just keep the open mind, and away we go.
I appreciate what you said there, because it's so true. Huh? You're gone? There, you're back.
Nope.
I appreciate what you said there, because you may be an old dog, but you can be taught a new trick. And I think that the point where you stop learning is where you stop growing. And if you stop growing, then you're going backward. Let's be honest. I remember reading in a book, and I'm not ashamed of it. I bought a book 15 years ago called "Bass Player for Dummies," because I wasn't a bass player starting off either. And you and I have talked about this. The music is between the notes, and if you just try and play every note you know for whatever reason, just because you can, you're missing the music. And the music is in the rest patterns. The music is in the opportunity to let it breathe. And I see that in your drumming now, whereas maybe I didn't before. I didn't really pay attention to it before. Something I want to ask you, Sean, that was important to me in the last 5-10 years, especially trying to develop my own musical prowess, is being open to other genres. You and I were rock guys. We grew up on Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and AC/DC, and you were a Kiss fan, you know, and that's the kind of music we liked. We tried to emulate. But have you shifted into different genres now? I love disco. Now, I can't believe it, but I freaking love the disco stuff now. He's like, why didn't I pay attention to it back in the day? What do you listen to?
I always liked disco. I mean, I remember Al Rusk gave me a book of disco drumming, and I learned some of it, and it was like, you know, pretty cool. I mean, you know, I'll go through phases. I mean, I'm still I like what I like kind of guy. You know, one of my all-time favorite albums is AC/DC Back in Black. I mean, it's just like best 2 and 4 out there. But you know, then I'll just listening to the radio is kind of funny, because what's that song there, Rasputin by Boney M? And I heard that one day, and I'm going, how did I pick up on the fact that was such a groovy, cool tune? So I still like what I like, but then there's certain things like some of the country stuff now. We do Country Girl by Luke Bryan, and my God, what a groove that has. And to do it right and then not fall off the click track and, quite frankly, fall off your drum stool is not easy. And so, yeah, I'm still a rock guy. And, I mean, I'll go back and I have phases where I'll get into certain things and what have you. We'll say, though, an album that changed my life, and it was because I wouldn't ever considered myself a groove guy, but when Porno Graffiti by Extreme came out, what was going on in the drums on that album blew my mind, because when I saw how high his hi-hats were up there, and he was playing a four-piece kit, but the way that he was interacting with that guitar and bass, it was just like, okay, you know, and you talked about you never paid attention to whether, you know, the drumming was breathing. Well, it wasn't. Too busy trying to play shit, right? And but that's an album that changed my life, and so, yeah, I mean, I like what I like, but I'm definitely open to stuff like "Oh Perry" by Steve Perry, or I'll Be All Right Without You by Journey, which was an album that Steve Smith didn't play on. Those are songs that I go like, wow, did I ever miss out on them? And it's aspects that you pick up on. And so, yeah, I don't know. Doors always open to new stuff.
Right on. Well, we'll probably get into wrap it up here now, Sean. I want to appreciate you coming on as a guest, as the first of our players series on the Barstools and Bandtalk website. We just wanted to sit. This is just the kind of stuff that Sean and I were sitting in a bar on a barstool. We would be doing. We'd be talking about things that we were excited about, new things that we learned or we tried, or hey, I went to Barely's and heard these blues players, and oh my God, you want to check out this guy? Yeah, and we'll go check him out. And this is an opportunity for us on this website to not just he and I check them out. We're going to bring them on the show and talk to them. And we want to have you on the show and talk to you about some of your favorite players and the things that you've done, things that are inspiring to you, maybe what your influences were, right? And it's just for us all to get to be a better, tighter community.
And that's a huge point, because really the only purpose of what icebreaker for some folks that thought they might be nervous. And I'll tell you, I'm crappy at math, and there's things that I lack. Confidence is not one of them. However, I know that other people sometimes don't like to go on and talk about themselves. And there's some great players out there that I want to hear from. I want to talk to Chris Monroe, because Chris is a guy I've always loved watching when he played. I want to talk to Tommy Maillet. Tommy's friggin' hilarious when he plays it. He's a wicked drummer. I want to talk to, Derek Belfontaine. I want to talk to Doug McKenna. I want to talk to these guys. They're all guys that, in one way, shape, or form, we all listen to. But I also want to talk to the Larry Halls and the Bruce Dixons and the,
Warren Robb or Bruce Nelson.
What we're saying is, don't be shy, because I really think that, forget about my little segment. My little segment was an icebreaker. We want to hear from you folks, right? That's what we want to hear about. And that was the point of this. So, don't send the hate mail about me talking about myself, because I know I do it a lot. But, please, guys, send us some notes, and we want to get it on there.
Equally, if not even more important, you the audience, you the fans, and we're all super fans to be on this website, to be on this page, to be involved with maritime music. You, the fans, should send Sean and I messages, and we'll get the guys on here that you want to hear from. It maybe inspired you as a budding young player, or something that you really enjoyed watching. I like to talk to Lee Denberg, one of my favorite local guitar players, because he was just, and I didn't really appreciate him at the time until I watched these videos 30 years later. I was like, oh my God, he was spot on every time, every night. I would like to talk to him. What did you do? What did you practice? What did you learn? How did you keep consistent that often? So if these are the kind of things you're interested in, let us know who you want us to talk to. And we are not scared to talk to anybody. That's the truth.
That's it.
So Sean McKenna,
thanks for this.
Sorry. Now in your stage persona, you're Sean P. McKenna, and we sure appreciate you being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave.
You want to tell me how great the show is? Everyone else does.
I mean, you're awesome. The other guy that you got with you, I'm sure there could be somebody better. No, there couldn't be anybody better, because come on. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm just saying, again, as we wrap, just having a pile of fun doing this, and thanks so much to everybody that's been participating, because without everybody participating, it's just Dave and Sean talking into freaking cameras and phones, being idiots. And there's only
we would do that anyhow. Far, we would do that anyhow. But this is more fun.
So,
all right.
I get to line up our next guest, so I'm out.
Yeah. Take care. Peace out.